The smell of Sunday morning coffee and impending confrontation filled the kitchen of our family's Victorian home on Maple Street. I sat at the familiar oak table where I'd eaten breakfast for the past 28 years, watching my brother Derek pace back and forth like a caged predator preparing for a kill. At 32, Derek had always been the golden child. Star quarterback and high school business degree from State University, married to his college sweetheart Jennifer, and father to two picture-perfect children. He worked as a regional sales manager for a medical device company, drove a leased BMW, and lived in a cookie-cutter suburban house that looked exactly like every other house in his development. I was the disappointment. 28 years old, single, working as a freelance consultant, I lived in the small guest room above the garage, drove a 10-year-old Subaru, and had never brought home a serious relationship for family inspection. What they didn't know was that my computer stuff involved developing cybersecurity solutions for Fortune 500 companies. What they didn't know was that my freelance consulting had evolved into a multi-million-dollar firm with clients across 3 continents. What they didn't know was that 6 months ago, I'd quietly purchased the family home when our parents fell behind on their mortgage payments. "Look, Madison," Derek said using the condescending tone he'd perfected since childhood. "We've all been patient with your situation, but enough is enough." Our parents, Robert and Linda Thornton, sat across from me at the table. Dad looked uncomfortable, avoiding eye contact as he stirred his coffee for the 3rd time. Mom kept glancing between Derek and me with the expression of someone watching a car accident in slow motion. "What Derek is trying to say," Mom interjected diplomatically, "is that we think it's time for you to find your own place. Establish some independence." Jennifer nodded from her position, leaning against the kitchen counter, her arms crossed in judgment. "It's not healthy for someone your age to still be living at home. Our kids are already asking questions about why Aunt Madison doesn't have her own house." I took a sip of my coffee, savoring both the rich flavor and the irony of the situation. "What kind of questions?" "Whether you're capable of taking care of yourself," Derek replied with a smirk. "Whether you have some kind of problem that prevents you from functioning like a normal adult." Through the window, I could see the carefully maintained garden where Mom spent her mornings, the garage where Dad worked on his vintage Mustang, the oak tree, where Derek and I had built a treehouse 20 years ago. This house held decades of memories. Birthday parties and Christmas mornings, homework sessions at this very table, late-night conversations on the front porch. It was the foundation of our family's identity, the one constant through all of life's changes. And now it was mine. "I see," I said calmly. "And you've all discussed this among yourselves." "We've been talking about it for months," Derek confirmed. "Mom and Dad are too polite to say it directly, but your presence here is becoming problematic." Dad finally looked up from his coffee. "Madison, sweetheart, we're not throwing you out. We just think it might be time for you to spread your wings. Find your own path. The path I've been on for the past 5 years isn't sufficient." "What path?" "Working on computers in your pajamas. Never leaving the house except to buy groceries. When was the last time you even went on a date?" "My personal life is my business, Derek. Not when it affects the whole family," Jennifer added. "The kids' friends come over and ask why their aunt lives in the garage like some kind of hermit. It's embarrassing." I set down my coffee cup and reached for my briefcase, which I'd strategically placed beside my chair. "So, you want me to move out?" "By Monday," Derek confirmed, his confidence growing as he sensed victory. "That gives you a week to find somewhere else to live. Mom and Dad have been more than generous letting you stay here this long." "Pack your bags, loser," he added with a smirk that reminded me exactly why I'd stopped trying to maintain a relationship with him years ago. Mom and Dad agreed. "You're out." Because I have some paperwork here that might complicate your timeline." "What kind of paperwork?" Mom asked, her voice carrying the first note of concern I'd heard all morning. I calmly pulled the property deed from my briefcase, spreading it across the table so everyone could see the official letterhead and legal formatting. "Actually, I bought this house from them last year." The silence that followed was deafening. Derek's confident smile began to crack like ice on a warm day. Jennifer straightened up from her casual lean against the counter. Mom's hand flew to her throat in that gesture she made when truly shocked. Dad was the first to speak. "Madison, what is that?" "It's the deed to this house, Dad, transferred from Robert and Linda Thornton to Madison Thornton on March 15th of last year." I pointed to the signatures at the bottom of the document. "Those are your signatures." Derek lunged forward, grabbing the deed with trembling hands. His eyes scanned the document frantically, looking for any sign that it was fake or fraudulent. But the signatures were real, the notary seal was official, and the legal language was ironclad. "This is impossible," he whispered. "Is it?" I opened my laptop, which had been sitting innocuously beside my breakfast plate. "Would you like to see the bank transfer records, the mortgage payoff documentation, the title insurance policy?" Mom sank back in her chair. "But you never said." "You never asked," I replied gently. "When you were 3 months behind on mortgage payments and facing foreclosure, you never mentioned it to me. When the bank sent the final notice, you handled it privately, so I handled the solution privately." Dad's face had gone pale. The mysterious investor who paid off our mortgage was me through my company Thornton Consulting Solutions. I pulled up another document on my laptop. "I've been the legal owner of this property for 14 months. Derek was still staring at the deed like it might spontaneously combust. "But you work on computers in your pajamas. How do you have enough money to buy a house?" I smiled, finally allowing myself to enjoy this moment I'd been anticipating for over a year. "Derek, what exactly do you think I do for work?" "Computer stuff," Jennifer said weakly. "Freelance things." I developed. "My computer stuff includes designing security systems for banks, hospitals, government agencies, and Fortune 500 companies. My freelance things generate approximately $47,000 per month in recurring revenue." The number hit them like a physical blow. Derek's mouth fell open. Jennifer grabbed the counter for support. "47,000, learn," Mom repeated faintly. "Per month on average. Some months are higher when we take on new implementation projects." Thornton Consulting Solutions currently has 18 full-time employees' offices in 3 cities and contracts with clients in 14 countries. Dad was doing math in his head, his engineer's brain automatically calculating annual figures. "That's over $500,000 per year before taxes and business expenses?" "Yes." I took another sip of coffee, though last year was particularly good. But now, he found his voice. "If you're so successful, why do you live like this?" He gestured around the modest kitchen at my simple clothes, at the life he'd been mocking minutes earlier. "Like what, Derek?" "Like someone who values family over flash. Like someone who prefers substance over status symbols." I met his eyes steadily. "I live here because this is home. I drive a reliable car because I don't need to impress anyone. I work from home because I can, and because it allows me to spend time with the people I care about." The irony of that last statement wasn't lost on anyone present. "But the house," Mom said, still processing. "You bought our house." "I saved our house," I corrected. "When you were facing foreclosure, you had 3 options. Lose the house, take out a predatory loan with crushing interest rates, or accept help from family." Dad looked stricken. "We didn't want to burden you with our problems. So instead, you let me solve them without telling me there was a problem to solve." I opened the deed again, pointing to specific clauses. "I structured the purchase to allow you to continue living here as long as you want. No rent, no mortgage payments, no conditions except basic property maintenance." Derek was scanning the document again, his sales manager brain finally catching up. "Wait, if you own the house, then we can't kick you out? We can't make you leave." "Correct." "But that means," he stopped, realizing the full implications. "That means, Derek," I said slowly, "that if anyone's moving out by Monday, it would be you and your family. You don't live here. You're guests when you visit." Jennifer made a small, choking sound. "But we assumed we thought. You thought Mom and Dad owned this house so you could pressure them to evict me." I closed the deed and slipped it back into my briefcase. "You thought wrong." Derek slumped into a chair, his earlier bravado completely deflated. How long have you been planning this? I wasn't planning anything, Derek. I was responding to circumstances. When I learned about the foreclosure threat, I acted. When you decided to stage this intervention, I prepared. Mom reached across the table, her hand covering mine. Madison, why didn't you tell us about your business, your success, the house? I looked at her fingers, remembering all the times those hands had comforted me during childhood, scraped knees, and teenage heartbreaks. Because I wanted to see who I really was to this family. Not who I could be if I were wealthy, but who I was when you thought I was unsuccessful. The truth of that statement settled over the kitchen like morning mist. Dad pushed back from the table, walking to the window where he stood looking out at the garden. We treated you like a failure, he said quietly. You treated me like someone whose value you couldn't measure using your traditional metrics, I replied. Success to you meant a corner office, a mortgage, a spouse, children. When I didn't fit that model, you assumed I was broken. Derek was still holding his head in his hands. Jesus, Madison. $500,000 a year, and we've been treating you like some kind of charity case? The money isn't the point, Derek. Then what is the point? Jennifer asked, her voice sharp with frustration. I stood up, gathering my briefcase and laptop. The point is that you never asked about my dreams, my goals, my definition of success. You never wondered if I might be happy with my choices. So what happens now? Dad asked, turning from the window. Now you decide what kind of family we're going to be going forward. I headed toward the stairs that led to my room. You can continue to see me as the disappointing daughter who needs to be managed and corrected. Or you can start seeing me as the person who's been quietly supporting this family for over a year. Supporting how Mom, who do you think paid for your new roof last summer? Dad, where did the money come from for your Mustang restoration? Derek, how do you think your kids' private school tuition got mysteriously covered when you were laid off for 3 months? The silence that followed was profound. I could see them processing, remembering anonymous gifts and unexpected windfalls they'd never questioned. Anonymous donations to the school, the insurance settlement that was higher than expected, Dad added. The charity that paid for my medical bills. Mom finished. I nodded. Thornton Family Foundation, a nonprofit I established to help family members who are too proud to ask for help directly. Derek looked up at me with something approaching awe. You've been taking care of all of us. I've been taking care of family I corrected, because that's what family does even when family doesn't recognize or appreciate it. Jennifer spoke for the first time in several minutes. Madison, I owe you an apology. We owe you several apologies. You owe me recognition, I said simply. Recognition that success comes in many forms and that love doesn't require conformity. I started up the stairs, then paused again. Derek, you asked when I was going to move out. The answer is never, unless I choose to. This is my house now. But you're always welcome here, as long as you can respect the person I actually am, instead of trying to change me into who you think I should be. Wait, Dad called out. Madison, can we start over? Can you tell us about your work, your company? Help us understand what we've been missing. I turned back to look at them, seeing genuine curiosity. How about we have dinner together tonight, and instead of talking about what's wrong with my life, you ask me what's right with it? Mom smiled through tears. I hadn't noticed her shedding. I'd love to hear about your work. Really hear about it. And maybe, Derek added quietly, you could explain how someone making $500,000 a year ends up living in their parents' garage. I laughed the first and I live there because it's quiet. It has great internet connectivity, and it's close to the people I love, even when they drive me crazy. As I headed up to my room, I heard Derek say to Jennifer, we need to call the kids and cancel this afternoon's plans. I want to have dinner here tonight. What should I tell them? Jennifer asked. Tell them their Aunt Madison has some very cool things to show them about computers. My phone was already buzzing with client calls and project updates. Thornton Consulting Solutions never slept, and I had 3 international conference calls scheduled for the afternoon. But tonight, for the first time in years, I'd be having dinner with family who actually wanted to know who I was. And maybe they'd finally understand that success isn't about where you live or what you drive. Sometimes it's about having the resources to save your family's home and the wisdom to let them discover your worth in their own time. The next morning, I came downstairs to find Derek sitting at the kitchen table with his laptop open, reading something intently. "Morning?" I said, pouring myself coffee from the pot he'd apparently started. "I've been up all night reading about cybersecurity," he said without looking up. "Did you know that data breaches cost companies an average of $4 million each? I did know that. It's why my services are in such demand." He closed the laptop and looked at me with new respect. "Madison, I need to ask you something, and I want you to know I'm asking as your brother, not as someone who's trying to manage your life." "Okay." "Would you be willing to consult for my company? We're a medical device manufacturer, and after reading about healthcare cybersecurity threats all night, I'm terrified we're not properly protected." I sat down across from him, seeing genuine concern rather than condescension for the first time in years. "I'd be happy to do a security assessment, though you should know I don't give family discounts." He laughed. "After what you've done for this family, I'd be insulted if you did." Mom appeared in the doorway, still in her robe. "Is it too early to ask more questions about your work? I've been thinking about our conversation last night." "It's never too early for genuine questions, Mom." She sat down next to Derek, cradling her coffee mug. "I want to understand something. When you said you valued family over flash, what did you mean exactly?" I thought about how to explain it in terms she'd understand. "I mean that I'd rather live in a house filled with people I love than a mansion where I'm isolated. I'd rather drive a reliable car that gets me where I need to go than lease something expensive that impresses strangers. I'd rather build wealth quietly and use it to help family than build it loudly and use it to compete with family." "But we almost kicked you out," Derek said, shame coloring his voice. "You almost tried to kick me out," I corrected with a smile. "There's a difference." Dad joined us carrying his coffee in the morning newspaper. "I have a confession," he said, settling into his chair. "Last night after you went to bed, I looked up your company online. And I found articles about you in trade magazines, awards you've won, testimonials from clients." He paused. "I found a photo of you speaking at a cybersecurity conference to an audience of about 1,000 people. The RSA conference in San Francisco. I gave a presentation on next-generation threat detection. You were wearing a business suit," Mom said. "You looked so professional, so confident." "I am professional, Mom. I just don't need to wear a suit to work from home." Derek was quiet for a moment, then asked, "Why didn't you ever show us those articles or tell us about the awards?" "Because I wanted you to value me for who I am, not what I've accomplished. I wanted you to see that happiness and fulfillment don't always look like what you expect them to look like." "But we couldn't see it," Dad admitted. "We were too busy comparing you to what we thought success should look." As my family sat around the kitchen table asking genuine questions about my work and my life, I realized that the house ownership revelation wasn't really about property or money. It was about finally showing them that success comes in many forms, and that sometimes the person you're overlooking is the one who's been supporting you all along. The Victorian house on Maple Street was more than just a building I'd purchased to save from foreclosure.